Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm going to be speaking to Senator Mark Warner, the man who heads the India caucus and also chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee. Thank you very much, Senator Warner, for joining me tonight. Very big question that everybody is asking, that the American polls, extremely polarized rhetoric that we've seen, and two assassination attempts at former president and the candidate in this elections, former President Donald Trump. How do you see these developments and how do you see the intelligence failure, would you call it, and what's the way forward?
Well, Navika, first of all, thank you for letting me appear on this show. And I'm a proud champion of the very strong friendship between India and the United States. I think, as I said, as somebody who's had the opportunity to visit India many times, India was always a nation that was about to arrive. That was what my friends in India would say. That was what Indian Americans would say. India's time has arrived on the world stage. And with that comes added responsibility, and something I hope we can talk about. In terms of political violence, it does worry me. It worries me. We see violence across Europe. We've seen some levels of violence even in Prime Minister Modi's recent elections. We've seen part of this due, I believe, to two things. One, the ability of the internet to exacerbate extreme voices on either end of the political spectrum. And candidly, when political candidates, and in the United States sometimes, when even Mr. Trump sometimes takes things he read off the internet that have no basis in truth and then expound those. I think as a national leader in any nation, you have to condemn political violence, but you also bear a responsibility of trying to speak things that are true. And unfortunately, and I think, I followed closely the Indian elections, I followed closely the European Union elections, the most recent British and French elections. We have foreign nation states who are using technology to try to spread division, often through the internet, often through some of the social media channels. And I'm not saying that is the causation of the polarization of the election in America. We have very stark choices, but there is something, as chair of the Intelligence Committee, that I think we have to watch very carefully in terms of foreign intervention. Americans, by their First Amendment right, have a right to say anything you want, even if it's stupid, even if it's untrue. But I worry if those statements are exacerbated or misrepresented by foreign intelligence services.
Very well said, Senator Warner. But let me ask you: has the Secret Service found its way around, learned lessons from what happened in Pennsylvania to now the second attempt? And do you think it's completely armed to deal with such dangers this election season?
Well, I think clearly there were huge mistakes at Mr. Trump's rally in Pennsylvania, and thank God, nothing happened on the golf course in Florida. I do think Mr. Trump has a tendency to play at the same golf courses all the time, and there are certain things. And he is not a president at this point. He is only a candidate. He's a former president. I'm in support of more protective services for our candidates, but I don't want people in elective office to be so barricaded from any interaction with other Americans that it becomes even further disconnect. Getting it right, I think the Social Security's got to improve its game, and if they need more money, I am anxious to provide that. But I also think there is a responsibility for political leaders of every stripe in America, to not condemn their opponents with language that incites hate in some cases, or, it's just, it is extraordinary in this country. Some of the political dialogue, at least at the presidential level, has never been this coarse and undermining.
Senator Warner, while we are on the issue of intelligence, let me ask you about the recent incidents in Lebanon, where pager devices have been used, have blown up and claimed a few lives. Children have been in those gatherings. Do you think, from the intelligence perspective, how do you see these developments? And do you think this is legitimate counter-terrorism strategy that has been adopted?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support Israel's right to defend itself. But how they defend itself is a question that is a fair issue, particularly from the United States, which is far and away Israel's biggest supporter. What I think we've seen with the pagers going off, and now earlier today, the walkie-talkies going off, is that the nature of kinetic conflict is changing. The circumstances is, who has the most tanks and guns and ships and planes may not be the victorious party. I mean, technology is going to play more and more a role. I think about the fact, like in Ukraine, I strongly support the Ukrainians' effort to push back Putin's aggression. The United States sent our best tanks, they're called the Abrams tanks, to the Ukrainians. Well, the Abrams tanks are protected from everything except for drones. So how we think about national security so that it is technology competition, not just who has the most guns, is extraordinarily important. And this is something that I've spent a lot of time on. My background was in the technology community. My background is in telecommunications, and I think about the challenges that Huawei places. I think about the challenges around artificial intelligence, quantum computing. I think about a lot of the activities in the life sciences and biosciences. And this is, again, where I think, the coordination and collaboration between India and America is so powerful and important. Chances are India is never going to have the most aircraft carriers, nuclear subs, or bomber planes. But India will be, one of the top 2 or 3 nations in the world on technology advancement. And when we see, particularly in the case of China, where we have such common concerns, China leaping ahead in technology domain after technology domain, our best natural partner on technology development is India.
Senator Warner, how do you see Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States, especially the QUAD meeting, which is going to be held in Delaware at the residence of President Joe Biden? Do you think there are significant achievements that are going to be taking place in this particular meeting on the eve of American elections, and going forward, a statement to the world?
Well, first, I think the Quad is one of the most important strategic relationships. India, United States, Japan, Australia. That is not only the future of the Pacific, but is in the future of Asia, but it is a critical relationship. And one of my frustrations at time with my friends in India have been pushing India, as they are now, should get the recognition as a great nation. Not simply a nation of the global south or the non-aligned, but a great nation. With that great nation status comes the responsibility, I think, to call out, you can't be morally ambiguous. And so I've been pushing on my Indian friends to say, the kind of blatant aggression that Putin had. The comments I get from, this did not come from Prime Minister Modi, but senior levels of Indian government is, one, it is a age issue. Older Indians, older Americans like me, Indians have a right to remember which country sided on which side in the India-Pakistan war in the 70s. I do think, that there are, some of this is younger generation would rather align with the United States. Others remember when India was in a hard time before. Russia stood by India, the United States didn't. I also think, there is a real consensus here on, and I hear from a senior Indian official, he said, what are the 3 biggest challenges? I asked him for India, and he said, China, China, China. So there is alignment there. And, how India does not lose its leadership role in the non-aligned movement, but at the same time takes the moral position and, at the end of the day, chooses a side. Part of that, one of the greatest assets we have in this relationship is the Indian American diaspora in America in terms of these people-to-people contacts. That's important. I also think as we ask our Indian friends to do more in the Quad beyond kind of, platitudes, we have to be willing to share more technology. We have to do more military sales. We can't ask India to walk away from Russia if we don't make a solid commitment that we will be there on a military sales supply run. I think this collaboration is important. Prime Minister Modi is extraordinarily popular. I've had the opportunity to visit with him many times. And I think his heart in terms of this relationship, he knows how important it is, but he's got to look out first for India's interest. We've got to show that we will be long-term, dependable partners.
Senator Warner, how do you see Prime Minister Modi's visit both to Russia and to Ukraine? Do you see this as taking forward the peace process? How do you see this war abating in the near future and India's role really trying to bring both sides to the table to discuss peace rather than war?
Well, we've not seen any legitimate peace process put forward. I mean, listen, I was disappointed that the Prime Minister gave the status of a visit with the Indian Prime Minister when most of the world has called out President Putin as the definite aggressor in this war. But I also, I'm old enough and I'm enough of a realpolitik. India still depends on Russia for most of its legacy military systems. So my hope is, and I don't think, I'm glad he saw Zelensky as well. I'm not sure either of those two leaders are fully ready to enter Putin and Zelensky into legitimate negotiations. I think it would be terribly important that they do. And if Prime Minister Modi and India can move that along, I'm hopeful. I'm also hopeful that as we can strengthen this, absolutely essential relationship between our two countries, that, my words, not yours, please, that India will have the confidence to say we can count on America. And when a powerful nation state violates human rights, violates the notion of territorial integrity, India will stand as the world's largest democracy against authoritarian regimes, no matter where they are.
Senator, let me come back to the question of American elections. And let me ask you, there has been a lot of speculation that you were among the people who convinced President Joe Biden right after that first presidential debate to step down from the president race and hand over the baton to somebody else. What was the reason? If I could be a fly on the wall, would you tell me what really transpired? How did President Joe Biden respond? Would really love to know your insight into those developments.
I've never claimed any direct responsibility on that, but let me complete that.
Okay. But any specific reason that some Democrats felt that President Joe Biden should step down, should step away from the presidential race? Well,
I have huge respect for President Biden. Most of his legislative accomplishments I have been part of. I'm part of a bipartisan group in the Senate, whether it was the semiconductor, what we call the CHIPS bill, the infrastructure bill, trying to make sure we change our energy policies. Joe Biden was a great president, but there is a time, to pass the torch. And what made me so confident about Kamala Harris was I'm chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Kamala Harris was on my committee. I saw how smart she was, how focused she was, how realistic she was about the threats that we live in a dangerous world. And her own heritage is something that could only happen in America. I say this respectfully. I could move to India tomorrow. I'm never going to be prime minister. So I do think that, she's an extraordinary person with an extraordinary, story. And I think as Americans hear more of that story, it's going to be a tight election, but I look forward to its result. It's one of the reasons why, as I said at the outset, and I do have to sign off now, but that Americans have enough differences between themselves. We have to argue that out. What we don't need are foreign governments like Russia, like Iran, and like China with their spying services trying to interfere in our elections. And I'm trying to sound that alarm in these last 48, 49 days.
We hear now that several social media platforms like Meta, for example, are not allowing their platforms to be used by organizations, which could influence American elections. And in this context, I would like to ask you about the recent tweet by Elon Musk. And that tweet, which came out right after the second attempt on Donald Trump. And then he said, why is nobody attacking Biden or Kamala Harris? And then subsequently, that tweet was deleted. What do you think about posts like these when they come up on social media?
I think America can learn from what India did a number of years back in terms of, for example, prohibiting TikTok. Social media companies are great. They have a lot of creativity. But India rightfully said, should we let such a powerful tool that is indirectly controlled by the Communist Party of China to be able to penetrate India in a way that it has in America? 190 million Americans, 90 minutes a day. That the algorithms that you see and those videos, young people get their news from TikTok. We have a lot to learn from India on that subject. On social media overall, we've seen many of the companies, some companies like Meta have been more responsible. Google's trying to be more responsible. TikTok, it is a huge disappointment. Years back, TikTok was one of the ones that would work most in terms of taking down dishonest content. Now, sometimes they promote it. That is a huge concern. And my last comment is just this. We're still 49 days out. The foreign governments who want to disrupt our election, they will spend most of their time and money in those last couple of days before the voting starts and takes place. And unfortunately in the United States, because of the actions, particularly of Mr. Trump, when he refused to acknowledge the results of the election, the nature of our vote counting may take a couple days afterwards. I mean, I think about how your elections are staggered over a long period of time. There's, again, things we can learn from India. But my call to the government, to the social media companies is, let's surge our resources those last 48 hours beforehand, but realize the 72 hours after the election, when the voting is still, or when the counting is taking place, and you could have a deep fake of, people might know Modi's face or my face or Trump's face or Harris's face. But if you've got somebody that looks like they're an election official tearing up ballots, that could actually lead to people taking to the streets. So, we've got to maintain our democracy. I appreciate very much this chance to talk with you.
Well, I know you're in a hurry to go in for your meeting, but I must remind you, you did not answer that question on Elon Musk and the tweet he put out on X. What do you really think about that? And do you really think, the same sense of responsibility would apply to the platform X, which is American, as you've said about the Chinese platforms?
I think I will say very clearly, X is not being responsible enough. I have been a big supporter of Elon Musk as he started Starlink, helped him try to break through the almost monopoly of the old space systems. He brought a lot of innovation. He's an extraordinarily bright guy. I wish he brought with that a same sense of responsibility as one of the most successful people in the world.
Thank you very much, Senator Warner, for sparing the time and sharing your views with the audiences back home in India and the Indian diaspora here in the United States. Appreciate your time and appreciate your candid answers on several of those questions that really you handled so well. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.